Shalom. Good evening.
Good evening, all. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. If I can ask everybody, if you don't mind, to just mute, just because it becomes easier for everybody. Thank you so much. Okay. I need to change the settings to work out how to do that myself to start with. And I think we should get started. Okay. Right. Okay. So, thank you all very much. Sorry, can I ask everybody to mute themselves, please? That would be... Just give me a second. Okay, so good evening. Thank you to everybody for joining me. This is a bit of a continuation in the series, but each year hopefully will be a standalone. Tonight we have some complicated subject matter to cover. If I can please ask everybody to mute themselves, thank you so much. Really doesn't work if everybody isn't muted. Thank you. Right, let's try again. Okay, let's go. I want to start off with an interesting insight, because I think it will frame our discussion moving forward in a very interesting way. And that is to do with the life and the biography, really, of the Ramchal. And it shows how the hashgacha, the way that Hashem orchestrates things, that works for our benefit. Because part of his life story, in some respects, a very tragic, perhaps we would think, aspect of his life story, where as a very young man, he claims to have received constant visions from a malach who was a Maggid, and he shared this, and it didn't go down too well, being only 100 years or so after Shabsai Tzvi, and Klal Yisrael was still reeling from the impact and the devastation that came as a result of the Shabbatian movement. And cut a long story short, he was finally forced, partly here in Germany, actually, by some Rabbonim and others who were very suspicious. And he was forced to sign an undertaking, and this is straight out, shortly after that, he left then, by around about 1735, he left for Amsterdam, and he undertook not to disseminate Kabbalah teachings anymore in public. And on the face of it, it sounds like a terrible tragedy, which in a sense it is, but let's flip it around. Let's think about this in the following way. Imagine if this wouldn't have happened. Then no doubt, as a preeminent Kabbalist, as a Makubal par excellence, he would have continued to compose, and he was a prolific author. He would have continued to compose many Sfarim on Kabbalah. And I think we pointed out in one of the earlier shiurim that actually, if you look at his corpus of work, the body of work the Sfarim that he writes, most of his Kabbalah Sfarim are written early on. And later on, we get other, so to speak, other Sfarim. And think what a chesed it is for Klal Yisrael. Had this not happened, he would have continued authoring, no doubt, Sfarim, esoteric, Kabbalistic Sfarim, and it would have remained the province of the very few people who are able to understand and read this aspect, this area of Torah, which is so difficult and is reserved only for a few, so to speak. But instead, he did the most unbelievable thing, and I want you to appreciate it, and this is really what frames our discussion tonight, and that is, make no mistake, Derech Hashem is absolutely 100% a Kabbalah Sefer. There is no question about it whatsoever. It's a Kabbalah Sefer. The genius of the Ramchal is that he manages to clothe. He studiously avoids using very obvious Kabbalistic terms. And it's almost contrived, it's forced, where he talks about Olam, later on he'll talk about the Olam Hakisei and the Malochim, instead of the correct technical vocabulary, which many of you may well know. He's davka avoiding it. But then what he does is he bequeaths Klal Yisrael this monumental sefer, this incredible sefer. And a testament to this is when I was debating and deciding to start a series of shiurim for the women, and I asked, I put out a question, what would people like to study? And I gave a couple of different options, and overwhelmingly the response was Derech Hashem. And that is the testament. Had it remained a Kabbalah sefer, you would never even have heard of it. And instead we have this unbelievable sefer, which gives us an incredible insight into Derech Hashem. But make no mistake, it is at its root, it is essentially absolutely a Kabbalah sefer. And it is written with incredible precision. Why am I telling you this? What do you care? Why is this relevant for you, whether it's a Kabbalah sefer, it's a this sefer? Who cares? I'll tell you why. If we don't have this understanding, we will miss some very important fundamental aspects of this sefer. And in order to do this, I am going to do two things with you. I'm going to start off by reading where we are up to in the Derech Hashem, and I don't know how many of you have access to the text, but I'm going to read a few lines and translate, and then I'm going to screen share a sheet with a number of different Maramakomis, a number of different sources, which are going to act as the give us context for understanding this perek. So the context of this, the very first chapter in Derech Hashem, which is about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we spent the first few weeks discussing the paradox or the dichotomy, whatever word you want to use, between knowledge, emunah, and yediyah, and we gave a very important shir on it last week. Those of you that haven't seen it can still see it. And we spoke about 6 pieces of information. In this perek, he sketches out 6 yediyos, 6 pieces of information, which, according to the Ramchal, are fundamental. They are essential and fundamental. Yesodos hametzios, to use his definition, they are foundations of existence. The first part of the Sefer is dealing with foundations of existence. And the most basic foundation of everything, of course, is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So he starts off with the first perek telling us what we absolutely need to know about Hashem. And it's difficult. It's a very difficult first chapter. And he sketches out, as I put in the poster, 6 things we need to know. I'll go through them again very quickly. I'll give you the high-level headlines. Number 1, we need to know he exists. We need to know there is a Borei Olam. There is an entity that brought all of this into existence. He did bring everything into existence. He continues to be the source of all existence. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is he is a perfect being. He's a perfect being. Point number 3, he has to exist. He must exist. He is the only thing that has to exist. All other things don't need to exist. Hashem is the only thing that must exist. Number 4 is that his existence does not depend on anything else. That's point number 4. Point number 5 is the simplicity of his being. It is poshut. It is simple, as opposed to being complicated and complex. And we'll talk about that when we get to it. And the final point, sorry, that was point number 5, yes. And the final point is that he is one. Yichudai, that he is one. These 6 things are absolutely crucial. If you don't know these things in as much, what does it mean to know these things? How big a philosopher do you need to be? We're going to discuss this tonight. But the Ramchal is telling us that you have to know these things. These 6 things, you have to know them. Now, why do I need to know them? On what basis do I need to know them? To what extent do I need to know them? Do I need to be a big philosopher? What does all this mean? So tonight we're going to try and not so much talk about the details of these 6 things, but go back to basics, to understanding how I access these 6 things. On what basis do I access them? And what does it really mean? Now, in order to do this, we have to, I'm going to screen share now, and we're going to start off with the following. Bear with me. It is this one, I think. I hope you should be able to see that. Okay, so let's go to the top. Now, we're going back. This here, number 1, is the end of the introduction to Derech Hashem. Okay, and I'm going to run through it very quickly, and you're going to see something quite interesting, I hope. He says as follows. This is the end of his introduction, and we've actually learned this, but we're going to go over it again because we need to get this right. We need to understand how it is that we relate to Hashem. On what basis? Because in this parak, he's talking about the 6 things we need to know about Hashem. How are we relating to him? In what identity? What capacity? Who is he? What are we talking about? Now let's read this very carefully, and I've made it bold here. V'hinei, number 1, V'hinei karasi shem hasefer Derech Hashem. I called this sefer Derech Hashem. Now, number 1, you notice that it is in the singular. Derech Hashem. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has way. Derech means a way. Now, we say, for example, in Ashrei, Tzadik Hashem b'chol derochov, all of his ways. He has many ways. So the Ramchal is not talking about many ways. He's talking about 1, derech. Why? Ki hinehu klal midrochov yizbarach. Because here we have a klal. A klal is a rule, a generality, something which contains within it all of the details. There is one thing, one rule, which is Derech Hashem, which is the general rule, and it contains within it, if you understand it carefully, it gives you an access, a way in, an introduction to everything. It is the klal midrochov yizbarach, of all of his ways. Now, these are the next words that we want to focus on. Shegila lanu al yedei nevi'ov v'hoidionu b'toirosai. What is the root source and the makor? Where do we get this Derech Hashem from? How do we know? How do we know that what the Derech Hashem is? Where do we get it from? We get it, he says very clearly, Shegila lanu al yedei nevi'ov v'hoidionu b'toirosai, because he revealed it to us through his nevi'im, and he showed it to us in his Torah. And here, the next phrase is perhaps the most important one of all. Ubahem menahaleinu umenahel kol beri'osav. And with this derech, menahaleinu, he menahaleinu, he is menahelas, fiat uns. He runs the world. This is the way. This is the Derech Hashem that he uses to run the universe. This is the operating system. Windows 10 point whatever. This is what it is. Derech Hashem. It's the software. It's the derech that he uses. There's one. Out of all of the drachim, there is one which contains within it all of the drachim. How do I know? Because the Nevi'im told us, and it is in the Torah. And why is this relevant to us? Because it is this that he uses to run the world. You want to understand, we live in a world. We live in a physical world. We know there is ruchnius. We know there is a very deep... Sorry, please mute yourself. Thank you so much. We know that there is, of course, ruchnius. There is what we see in the physical world is only the external shell of an inner spiritual reality. but we don't see that with our eyes. So I need to know, how do I get through this? What is the operating system? What are the rules? What are the laws? Like when you drive on the road, you have to know, do I drive on the left? Do I drive on the right? When do I turn? When do I stop? You got to know the rules. This is, he says, I'm going to show you in this sefer, Derech Hashem, what the operating system that Hashem uses to run the world. Now, if you know that, then you can succeed. Then you can get through it and you can do it properly. So the first thing I want to note, please, and this is really important. The perek we're about to learn is the perek about Hashem. And I want to try and tell you an idea. It's really, I can't get out of it. It's a Kabbalistic idea, but you have to know this. We never, ever, 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 ever talk about Hashem. Whenever we talk about it, we never talk about him, who he is and what he is. Because it is quite simply impossible and unknowable, and it is actually forbidden. It is absolutely asur to even think about it, about who he is, what he is. This sefer is about how does he want me to relate to him. This is about relationship. Not who is Hashem in essence, be'emes. It is absolutely strictly forbidden. Again, without going into why, but the very simple reason is because it's a waste of time. It is not possible for us to fathom and work out who Hashem is. One thing and one thing only interests us and interests him, is that he wants to have a relationship with us, and therefore he acts in a certain way, in certain ways, Derech Hashem, so that we can look at what happens in our lives, in the world, to our nation, to Eretz Yisrael, to Am Yisrael, to our families, to our kehilos, and we can then work backwards and say, I understand what Hashem wants from me. And the more you know this Derech Hashem, the Derech, the way that he is menahel, as the Ramchal writes here, the way that he runs the world, that to that extent, and to that extent only, am I going to talk about Hashem. And therefore, make no mistake, in this Perek Aleph that we're learning 6 things about Hashem, these 6 things are not 6 things about who Hashem is, chas v'sholem. It's 6 things, the maximum that I can know about Hashem as he wishes to be known to us. This is incredibly important. And I'm going to show it to you even more. In every bracha we say, Baruch atah Hashem. Atah, you. In German, not even Sie. Du, atah, direct. There's a chutzpah if there ever was one. So do you know what we do in the bracha? Immediately we excuse ourselves and we say, how can I say atah? Because Elokeinu, Melech Haolam, this is what you want. You want us to speak to you directly. But never forget, when we speak to him directly, we're speaking to him as Elokeinu, Melech Haolam. As he relates to us, he creates a world. We can never think about what was before he created the world. That's absolutely asur. And it's a waste of time because you can't work out. I don't know about you, you can't work out something before time, before there was time. We don't even have the language. Remember, I said before there was time. The word before is time. It's a waste of time to think about those things, and it's actually forbidden. We are dealing with one thing only. How does Hashem relate to us? Ubahem menahel kol briyosov. Okay? So when we talk about Hashem, as we are going to, the 6 things about him, it is Hashem from the point that, up to the highest point that I'm able to say anything about Hashem as he begins to relate to us. Okay? That's the first point, and that is incredibly important. Now let's just go on to the next line, and you're going to see something really, really interesting, and I'm just going to mention it quickly, by the way. He says he divides it into 4 parts. He says, I'm going to divide my sefer into 4 parts. Now, the Ramchal is a Kabbalist. This is a sefer of Kabbalah. And he's written the same thing in other of his Sfarim in a way that is very clear that it is Kabbalah. And you need to know, for example, these four things absolutely correspond to the four letters of Yud, K, Vav, and Hey. That's what it corresponds to, these four things. He says, number one, Aleph, Adaber boy al klal yesoidos hametzius uprotov. The first part of the Sefer, which corresponds to the Yud in the Yud K Vav K, which is the concept of Chochmah, of knowledge, is I will tell you about the rule of all of existence. And the first bit, the first perek where he talks about Hashem is actually the top of the letter Yud. It's called Kutso Shel Yud, where we can know absolutely nothing. It's called Ayin. It's nothing. Chochma me Ayin timotze comes from nowhere. We can't even think beyond that. Please turn mute yourself, whoever you are. Thank you so much. And then he will go on to the Yud, which is Chochma, which is the man and the Schar v'Onesh. And then base is Hashgachoso Yizbarach. How does Hashem relate to us? That's the second part. That corresponds to the Hey in Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is like a house, Bina, Boina, structure. How do we relate to it? And then a Gimel is Nevuah, which corresponds to the Vav in Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is a like the neck, like the spine, where Hashem information flows down to us, and he connects the word Vav. The letter Vav is also a word. Vavim la'amudah means a hook, connection. Vav and then finally Avodah, which is the final Hey, and he puts all the bits together. But actually, it is a commentary on, because we're talking about Hashem's operating system for the universe. The operating system for the universe is Yud Kei Vav Kei. That's what it is. And therefore, these are all bits and aspects within it. The reason that I'm mentioning this is, again, we're not learning Kabbalah, obviously, but to realize that we're not talking about Hashem as he is. We are talking about Hashem as he relates to us. And we start from the highest point that we can say anything about him at all, which is what we're learning in Perek Aleph, and then we move on. And the idea is so that I understand, that I experience this world, and I see through the cloud, and I know what's really going on behind it, that it is all one thing, Derech Hashem. Okay? And with this, now that we have this Yesoid, this concept, I'm going to show you this in another bit of his writings, and I'm going to show you what would appear to be an absolute contradiction in the Ramchal. And it's really very straightforward. Follow with me. It's two pieces in Das Tvunos. You see, I've got over here on the screen, number 2 and number 3. Okay, these are two pieces from Das Tvunos, another sefer that he wrote. Okay, so the first bit is from Das Tvunos, letter Ois Lamed Beis 32, and then the second bit over here, number 3, comes from Das Tvunos 54. Let's read the first one. I'll rush through it because we don't need to see the whole thing. I only want to take out one idea, which I've highlighted here, if you can see. Omar HaSeichel. The Sefer Das Tvunos is a dialogue, as the Ramchal did in a number of his svarim, between the Seichel and the Neshama. That's the way he puts it. So the Seichel says as follows. Omar HaSeichel, number 2. Rishonot tzarich sheteidi she'afal pi she'amarnu she'rotza ha'odin baruch hu leses hasogam yikor shleimus el nivrav. Says the Seichel, even though we have already said that Hashem wanted us to have an understanding of some of his perfection, of course, it is logical to realize Hashem is not telling us that we should be able to understand all of his shleimus, all of his perfection, kol shleimusai. That's impossible. Why? There is no end. There is no end, so it's impossible. So even though we say that Hashem wanted us to have an understanding of a little bit of his shleimus, of his perfection, but of course, says the Seichel, it can't be all of his shleimus. Okay, and then he goes on, he says, this is obvious. Now look at the bit at the end. He says, listen to this. He says, and therefore what we end up with is a little bit of something that we can understand a little bit about Hashem's shleimus, about his perfection. Because he says, if whatever we can understand about Hashem's perfection, bottom line, I put it in bold, lo yihyeh afilu ketipo min hayom hagadol. It would not be even a drop from this great sea of Hashem's shleimus. Let's just translate that and think about this a second. He is saying that whatever it is that we can appreciate and we can understand, and he wants us to understand a little bit of his shleimus, of his perfection, however much, however brilliant you are, however holy you are, Moshe Rabbeinu, right, the greatest level of nevuah, did not understand afilu ketipom min hayam, not even one drop from the sea. Now, the Ramchal is writing this with tremendous precision. You hear that? It is, in other words, he is saying it is impossible for a human being, however great, to understand even the tiniest amount of Hashem's shleimus. Let's go on to the next source. Das Tvunos Ois Nun Daled 54. And he seems to be saying the same sort of thing. You need to know that all of the actions of Hashem, Kol Maaseh Hashem Noirahu, they're amazing and they are deep. There is no end to them. Magodlu Maasecho Hashem, how great are your actions, Hashem? And he goes on and on and on like this until he comes to the bottom. He says, whatever we can understand of the oimek, of the depth of Hashem's maisim, it is only a very small amount. So it seems to be saying the same thing that he said, 30, 20 or so. Sorry, please mute yourself. Thank you. What an annoying. He seems to be saying the same thing. Now go to the last 2.5 lines in number 3 here. But do not think for a second, he says, that when we understand something, that we've got it all the chokhmah, which is included in these actions. Because whatever a person can achieve, whatever a person can understand, afilu of Hashem's actions, however much you understand, it will only be the equivalent of one drop of the Yom HaGodel. In other words, what's he saying? We can understand a bit. We can understand a tippa min Yom HaGodel. And this would appear to be a contradiction in the Ramchal. Do you see that? I'll go through this again. Look, now you've got both of these quotes on the screen together. Look at the top one. He says, however much a person understands, it will not be even. It'll never be even like a tippa min Yom. Not even a drop of the sea. And then 20 Osias later, when he says we can never understand fully what the actions of Hashem, but however much we understand, it will only be like a tippa, where he says very clearly we are capable of understanding one drop of this Yam HaGodel. You hear the question? It would appear to be a very clear contradiction in the Ramchal. Now that can't be. Now listen to the genius and the insight, the depth of how the Ramchal wrote his Sefer so carefully. And I've given you the answer already. The truth is tonight I've already given you the answer, but hopefully now you will appreciate it. If we look back, now the first thing I want to say before we go any further, let's think about the moshel that he uses, a drop from the sea. Let's think about the drop from the sea. What is a drop from the sea? You go to the sea and you take out a drop. Now, what has that drop got in it? You can take it to the laboratory and you can analyze it. The chemicals. You want to know something about the sea? If you want to know something about the sea, it's very simple. Take a drop from the ocean, take a drop, take it to the laboratory and analyze it. And you'll see the chemicals. You'll see how salty it is, how much pollution there is in, at least in that bit. Or what is a sea? A sea is just millions and millions and millions and millions of drops. But if you have a drop, you've really got everything, but only a little bit of everything. You hear? So he uses this mashal very, very carefully. But he is using this mashal in 2 different ways. In the earlier quote, he says, however much you understand, it will never even be a drop. And in the second bit, he says, however much we understand, it will only be a drop. You can understand a drop, what's going on. And if you read it carefully, it is the answer jumps off the page. I'll do it for you. The first bit, Das Tvunos Ois Lamed Beis, he is talking about Shleimus Hashem. He's talking about Hashem's perfection. He is Sholem. Sholem means that Hashem is no end, infinite. No end. Do you know what that means? Here he is talking about who Hashem is and what Hashem is. Hashem is infinite. There is no end. There is no beginning also, but there is no end to who he is and what he is and how perfect he is. What happens if you start, let's say you have an infinite series of numbers, infinite, they never end, infinity, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you count to 1 billion. How far are you towards infinity? The answer is you are exactly as far as you were before you started counting, because there's no end. You haven't even got a tipah min hayam. When you're talking about Hashem, who he is infinite. And therefore, it is not possible to get even a tipah min hayam, because if you were able to get a tipah min hayam, that means you would have a little something which would contain within it all of the qualities, all of the midos of Hashem's perfection. The only problem is you don't have enough of them. You've got a whole big sea, so you need billions of drops, and that is not possible. It is an absolute, and we need to know this, it is an impossibility. In Ois Lamed Beis, he is talking about Hashem, who Hashem is and what Hashem is. Forget it. Whatever a person manages to understand, you will never even start. That's the truth. That's really what he's saying. In understanding Hashem's essence, mitziusoi, amitusoi, who he is, what he is, his shleimus, how perfect he is, forget it. There's no point even starting. And however far you get, you have not even got a tipah min hayam, nothing doing. Remember that, by the way, when we come to, probably won't get there tonight, when we come to discussing Hashem's shleimus, because in Perek Aleph here, he does talk about Hashem's shleimus. So we need to ask ourselves the question, well, if in here in Das Tvunos, he's telling us that you can never even start that process, then how come over here in Derech Hashem, he's telling us that actually we need to know about Hashem's shleimus? Make up your mind. Yeah, we'll come back, hopefully we'll answer that. But now let's look at the second piece we quoted from Das Tvunos. Here he is not talking about Hashem as he is. Look at the words that he uses here again and again. He's talking about ma'aseh Hashem. Here he's talking about what Hashem does. Magodlu ma'asecha Hashem. This is Hashem doing things. What does it mean Hashem does things? He relates to us. He creates a world. He does things. Why? So that we can begin to understand a little bit of what he is trying. What does he want from me, from the world? What is the point of it? Here we're not talking about Hashem as who he or what he is. We're talking about Hashem doing things, his actions. And here he says, Ma'aseh Hashem. They are very deep. Magodlu ma'asecha Hashem. Ma'oid omku machshveisecha. They're incredibly deep. And the truth is, even in Kabbalah, even in Hashem's actions, we still call him Ein Sof. But the difference is here, not only we can, but we must get as many drops from this Yam HaGodol of understanding Hashem's actions and interactions with us. Here, not only is it possible, but it is a chiyuv, it is pflicht. We have to. It's an absolute obligation to begin to look at the world, to look at ourselves, to look at everything that happens to us, and to begin to understand as much as we possibly can about the world that he has created, about ourselves that he has created. What does he want from me? What does he want from the world? And there we have to try and understand as much as we can the actions of Hashem. But he reminds us at the end of Ois Nun Daled, however far you get, remember, even in his actions, you're still only one drop, however much you do. But of course, this is something that we are obligated to do. And the reason I wanted to highlight this to you is to show how carefully he writes this. Every word is incredibly precious. And here we're going to get to the next bit of the shir tonight. And here I've put here source number 4. This is an incredible, it's quite long, I'm afraid, but I'll do it as quickly as I can, but it answers, this piece here in the Ramchal should answer many, many questions. I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions. I'm going to ask Naaseh v'nishma. Yes? What do we say? We said Naaseh, we will do v'nishma, and then we will hear. So we usually understand that Naaseh, oh, it's an amazing thing we did. We said Naaseh, we'll do it, and only then we'll try and understand. That's not really the although that is true also, but that's not the depth of really what is going on over here. And this is trying to explain to us the 6 things that the Ramchal is telling us that we must know about Hashem in this perek. I want tonight to try and explain to you how we are to understand them. Does that mean we have to be big philosophers? And the answer is no. No. If you, I don't know whether any of you were at last week's shir. If you were at last week's shir, this will be so much easier, because we explained last week how the emunah comes from inside of us. It's not something that we get through the seichel. And I'm going to extend on this idea here using another piece of the Ramchal. One more question before we do this. This is a question Rav Moshe Shapiro Zechron Livracha used to ask. The Torah tells us there are a couple of different things that we have to remember. Zocher. Let's take an example. Amalek. Okay, Purim's coming up. Yeah, not that long. So let's think about Amalek. Zocher reis hasha'asa lecha Amalek. Every single Jew has an obligation to remember what Amalek did to us. Here's a question for you. Hands up. Okay, I can't see, it doesn't matter. Do you remember what Amalek did? I don't remember what Amalek did. How can the Torah tell me? Hashem says, Zocher, I want you to remember. It doesn't just mean mention it and say it. It actually means remember. Well, how can I remember? I do not remember. The Torah says, remember Ma'amad Har Sinai. Remember you stood at Har Sinai? Now, all of our neshamas were there. There's no question. The Rambam writes very famously, and this is actually the key. Maybe I'll just read you out quickly his lashon. I have it. I was going to put it on the screen, but bear with me 1 second. The Rambam writes, where was it? Give me a second. Sorry, the Rambam, it's quite a famous Rambam. He says that Ma'amad Har Sinai, he says Ma'amad Har Sinai is something that is made an impression on our neshama, and it's actually hidden inside of us. It's there. And if somebody seriously and genuinely, here I found it. I'll read you his words because I think it's important. Ukvar hivtichonu haboyre yizbarach. Very strong words. The Rambam wrote a very famous letter to the Yidden in Yemen, Igeres Teiman. They were struggling with various things with their emunah. It's kedai to learn it if you ever get a chance. It's an incredible thing. He writes many amazing things there. Here's one of the things he writes. I'm going to read and translate. Ukvar hivtichonu haboyre yizbarach. Hashem promised us, ka'odom hanichnas orev lechaveiroi, like somebody who becomes a guarantor for somebody else. V'dai lonu ba'arvusai, says the Rambam. I think Hashem is a very good person that can be an orev for us. He guarantees it. What does he say? V'hoidiyonu, he told us, shekol mi she'omad al Har Sinai, anybody who was at Har Sinai, shehem ma'aminim b'nevuas Moshe Rabbeinu. Anybody who is at Har Sinai is a ma'amin in the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. B'chol ma sheba al yodoi heimu b'neihem u'bnei b'neihem ad olam. Whatever will happen to you, Holocaust, pogrom, anything, if you were at Har Sinai, you will remember. You will, sorry, he doesn't say remember, you will be ma'amin till the end of days. Lefichach, therefore, says the Rambam, yesh lo das, you need to know, shekol mi shenoto miderech hadas hanasuna b'mamadahu, anybody who chooses to move away from this and says, I absolutely don't believe, and that if they really don't believe, b'yodua she'enei mizera ho'anoshim ahem. They are not Jewish. They weren't there at Har Sinai. If you are at Har Sinai, says the Rambam, you believe. Ma'aminim, we are. Our identity is ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim. We are ma'aminim. What does that mean? Do you realize this is exactly what I was telling you last week? I didn't quote it then. We are ma'aminim. We just need to dig inside and discover it and uncover it. Because we were exposed, as we'll see shortly, on Har Sinai, to a reality that was so deep and so strong and so powerful that all we need to do, here's the key word, is remember it. You do remember it. You can, and you must remember it because you actually have it inside of you. You need to just find it. This is what the Rambam is saying. It's an incredible idea. So these 6 things, as we shall see, and I'm going to use the Ramchal here in another place to show this to you. He says this in an incredibly beautiful way. This is source number 4 here, is from his introduction to another sefer that he wrote, Ma'amar Havikuach, a dispute that he had. I'm going to read and translate. These words they're beautiful, they are eloquent, and it is absolutely this idea, and it is this concept that needs to frame our discussion about 6 ideas which might be considered very deep and very philosophical, and somebody might say to me, I'm a woman, or women, of course, are capable of very deep thought, or somebody might say to me, a man might say, I'm not a philosopher, and how can you expect me to know about Hashem has to exist, and I'm not into philosophy? The answer is you don't need to be. You need to be into yourself. You need to be able, you need to understand and know that it is in you. And he's now going to show us where this comes from. Source number 4, says the Ramchal, Avol, it's so beautiful. When Hashem wanted to bring close to him his nation that is so beloved to him, he tore open the heavens. He revealed to them all his hidden matters. Until they all knew and it was totally clear to them. What? Not who Hashem is, chas v'shalom. Remember we said that's not possible. But what did they know? Shekol ha'hanhoga shel hatachtonim. That the operating system, the Derech Hashem, that all of the ways that he relates and interacts to this world, any detail, you can think of as many millions and billions of details, it doesn't matter, because we saw the klal, we saw the Derech Hashem. We saw, we knew that it was, everything is in the hand of the Shekhinah. There's the tiniest thing which looks in the world to be, it's nothing. It's an incredibly important part of this big program. They knew, they understood the secret of creation. Why was the world created? How does it keep going? How does it work? What's going to be in the end? They knew the depth of his eitzah, of his rotzoin, not of him, that's unknowable, but of his relationship, the depth of his actions, creation, relationship. They knew it all. And he goes on to say, Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu Her Elohem Kol HaMetzias, Hashem showed us all of existence. Almahu Oimed. V'yodu Bebirur. We saw clearly that he alone runs the show. V'ein Shuman Hoga Acheres. There's nothing else. No Teva, no Mikra, no Shum Dava Acher. Elo Hahan Hoga Shehu Yizbarach Shmoi Manhig Ba'oimek Ha'etza. And then, once we knew that, he then said to us, and if you get time, if you have any time in the next few days, take out Dvorim Perek Dalad. Chapter 4 in Devarim, in Russian, in German, in English, in Dutch, whatever it is, whatever language you understand. Devarim Perek Dalad. And read through the whole Perek. And you will see the most amazing thing. Hashem, after he did this, he's only going to do this once in all of creation. He took all the neshamas, every neshama that would be born, and he showed us. Rabbeinu Bechai, the Rambam and the Ramban all say that we, for a short while, had the same level of nevuah as Moshe Rabbeinu. Utter, total clarity. We saw it all. What did we see? Not Hashem as in Hashem. That's not possible. It means we saw and we understood within creation why he created. How does it work? What is the purpose of it all? Who's in charge? Who's running the show? We saw the whole software. He took all the source code to all the software and he showed it to all of us and it was in front of our eyes. Ata horei solodas. You saw it. You didn't hear it, you saw it. It was in front of your eyes. And then he said to them, don't forget this. This you must pass on to your children. You saw it in your living memory. The children that will be born later, it will be imprinted in their neshama, because that's who they are, and the neshamas were there in Har Sinai. But you need to give them the key and the tool to connecting to it and to unlocking. And this said Moshe Shapiro, genius, beautiful. That's Naaseh v'nishma. Hashem hid all of the revelation, all of the clarity, all of the emes that was in the Ma'amad Har Sinai. Where did he hide it? He hid it in the mitzvahs, in the Torah. So that if a Yid does the mitzvah correctly, it is the trigger for your memory. Na'aseh, do it. And then you'll remember. Do the mitzvah. Because inside all of the mitzvahs, HaKadoshis, Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvosav, the mitzvah connects us. And in the mitzvahs and in the Torah is all the thunder and the lightning and the shofar and the revelation and the emes and the clarity. It's all there. And therefore, of course, you can remember. But first, Naaseh, how do you remember? Naaseh, do the mitzvah. That will be the trigger. It's all in there. And that will connect to your heart. And you will remember. And you must remember. And you must hand that over to your children. V'tziva lahem, and he commanded them, lahoshiv el libam ha'emes hazeh, sheyeh misyashiv lehem b'li sofek. What does it say? V'yodata hayom v'ashevoso levavecha. All of these things, v'hinei kol advarim me'elu ro oisam b'matan Torah. We saw all of these things in Matan Torah, says the Ramchal. And so it says, Hashem hein heronu Hashem elik. Hein heronu Hashem elikenos kavod. HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us his kavod. Va'al kein tziva oisam, and therefore he commanded them. Shema shero'u hein be'inehem. Whatever you saw, yehiyu moisrim libneihem u'libnei b'neim l'doros. Hand that over. And that's why he said, Raki Shomalacha, remember, don't forget. He doesn't say the things Asher Shomata, bottom line, that which you heard. He said, Asher ro'u einechon. Here's the final quote. Aval ha'emesu. And this is the final quote. Aval ha'emesu, he says, the truth is, al masherom min ha'kovod ha'elyon, what they saw of the Hashem's kovod, as it says, hein her'onu Hashem elokechas kovodoi, v'shem Moshe atzmoi mazhira, Moshe himself tells them, ato horei soladas, you saw, v'yodato hayom. On that he tells them, don't forget. And here's the final paragraph, which contains in it incredible words. Kizeh masheyodim Yisrael. That which we as Jews know. She'ein shar ha'umas yodim klal. Other nations do not know. They cannot know. Mipnei she'Yisrael zochu liros kol zeh b'Har Sinai. We saw this in Har Sinai. Mashe lo ra'u umas ha'olam. The nations of the world didn't see it. The nations of the world can only deal with philosophy. That's all they can deal with. Those are the tools at their disposal. Says the Ramchal, I've already written. He wanted to hide his Shechina in this world. The Hari Mesech Mavdil Bifnei HaTachtonim is a mask which divides from the world. They can't see this. It's not possible. Elo shepa'am achas, once in history, Rotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted, V'kora hamesach hazeh lifnei kol Yisrael. He tore this mask away from all of Klal Yisrael, ad shehe'emidam ala mitoi, until he showed them clearly his truth, meaning, again, careful, not the truth of his essence, but the truth of how he is, how he runs the world, and he relates to everybody. Umisham v'hola, from that moment on, look at this. Again, I should have underlined this phrase, Nisharu hadvorim chasumim belibam. From that moment on, we have chosum, sealed, but it is belibam, it's in our hearts. We have it locked up, it's there. The mitzvah that we have is to teach it to our children. This is what we will be learning. These 6 things that we're going to be learning about Hashem, this is not a philosophical exercise. It cannot be. It's not possible. We are not expected to be great philosophers. And it's more than that. What the clarity that we are expected to achieve is an emes and a clarity that it goes way beyond seichel enushi. And this comes only from that which we experienced. We were temporarily raised and elevated to become Nevi'im, and we saw with clarity. V'yodat hayom, please take the time in the next, whenever you get the time, take Dvarim Perek Daled, and just do it kipshutai. Take it out and read it. Just read the psukim and let the whole flow of the thing, you'll understand. This is what it is. We have it inside of us. So let's recap. And next week, I think we will begin, or at least we'll go on to talking about some of the detail in terms of Hashem's Shleimus. Number 1, we learnt this evening. I hope I showed you that we never, ever talk about Hashem, his essence, who he is and what he is. It is impossible, unknowable. It is forbidden, and there is no tachlis. All the Kabbalah Sfarim only ever start from the very highest part that we can talk about is HaKadosh Baruch Hu choosing to create a world, Ritzoynoi HaPoshut, to choose to create a world. And from there, that's in the highest level, Atzilus, whatever you want to talk about. And there, Tzimtzum, the other very highest Kabbalistic ideas, none of these Chas v'Sholem have anything to do with who Hashem and what he is in essence, as I showed you in the Das Tvunos. Otherwise, we have a contradiction. Not even a drop of the sea. What we busy ourselves with, Derech Hashem that we are learning. What is the Derech Hashem? As he says in the introduction, the Derech Hashem is the operating system, the Hashem of relationship, Hashem that creates a world and wants a relationship with us. And there is layer upon layer upon layer. And even there, we still talk about him as Ein Sof at the highest level. And we can know only a little bit. If we're lucky, when we talk about his actions, we can maybe, if we're very lucky, get a drop, tipom min hayam, in understanding. But the 6 pieces of information that we need to know about Hashem as he relates to us, the Melech HaOlam, Elokeinu, Melech HaOlam, those 6 pieces of information are pieces of information that we actually are already in possession of. We have them. Chasumim belibeinu, as the Ramchal says. They're in there. We just need to remember. Naaseh, do the mitzvahs. They contain within them all of the revelation of Har Sinai, all of the Kedusha, all of the thunder and lightning and the shofar, and it's all there. Naaseh, and then we can remember the Nishma. That is the trigger then for the Zikaron that we have inside of us. And then we'll begin to look at, Yitz Hashem next week, we'll begin to look at some of the detail when we talk about Hashem's perfection and we talk about that he must exist and all this other stuff. This is all within the perspective of him existing within creation and as he relates to us and the relevance. Why is it relevant for us? Because we need to be able to live lives that are meaningful and do the right thing. And the more that we understand Derech Hashem, as he says in the end of the introduction, the klal, the system which he uses, then we can understand the details and we can live life as we really should as Elech Yidden. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I wish you all well. Bleib gesund. Take care. Kol tov. Good night.
Thanks.